Secretary Madeleine Albright, who was under the presidency of US President Bill Clinton. Mrs. Albright, Mrs. Secretary, Vladimir Putin definitely took advantage of a Donald Trump who was too weak, too gullible. Do you think the firmness that President Biden wants to show vis-à-vis Vladimir Putin will pay off?
I certainly hope so, because it's very important. And President Biden doesn't want to be flattered by Putin and then let Putin get away with the kinds of things that he did by saying that none of the things that we knew were happening really were happening. And it was practically, I mean, frankly, appalling that in so many ways Trump trusted Putin over our own intelligence services. Often Putin is playing a weak hand well, mainly because he was allowed to do it. And I think that we cannot allow that kind of thing to happen. Putin is a former KGB agent. He knows what he's doing, and he's undermining our democracies, and we cannot let that go on.
Mrs. Secretary, concretely, how President Biden will try to mend the awful relationship that Donald Trump had with the United States, the European Union, and NATO?
I think that there will be a genuine approach of listening and redeveloping a lot of the partnerships within an entirely different atmosphere. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think that you will see an America that wants to really operate within a functioning international system, but it will also, I think, require response from the other side. And I do hope, I always say this, you know this, and I was introduced this way. I was a born European. I just was raised in the United States, and I see myself as kind of the epitome of the US-European relationship. It hasn't always been easy, but I really do think that the Biden administration wants to have a different relationship of partnership, not only to deal with the issues of US-European issues, but also as partners dealing with other parts of the world. We started talking about China. I do think that there also, the US-European approach to how to deal with China will be very important.
Talking precisely about NATO, according to you, must Turkish President Erdogan, as a member of the organization, with the second most important army behind the one of the United States, must he be ousted for having one foot in Putin's backyard? Must he clarify his position?
I think that one has to be extremely careful with Turkey. Turkey is in a very important position geographically, and they have been good NATO partners. I think that there are a number of things that the Turks are doing that are very worrisome in terms of the way that they are looking at using Russian equipment and a variety of different things. Their behavior generally, frankly, and you're not going to like this, but I think that it was a big mistake earlier on, long before Erdogan, for Turkey to not be welcomed by the European Union. And I think that they need to, Erdogan has to stop doing the kinds of things that he's doing. But I think we need to remember that Turkey is in a geographically sensitive spot and important to us. And there needs to be a way to deal with what we see as unacceptable behavior. But I think we have to be very, very careful, because they are agitating in a number of places where we need to have some influence over their behavior. And so this is a delicate and difficult problem for this administration and for the NATO partners.
Mrs. Secretary, getting back to China, how do you think President Biden should deal with Chinese President Xi Jinping, especially since he signed an economic and military pact with Russia and Iran on 25 years, a kind of challenge to the West?
I think the United States is very worried about the kinds of things that Chinese military is doing in the South and East China Sea, also in the Straits of Taiwan. And that is where they are an adversary. And we have to make very clear that they are undermining international rules of navigation. The other is that they are competitors in a lot of technology and stealing intellectual property. And that has to be made clear. And the agreements that were worked out in the first round that Trump did, I think they are being looked at in terms of their effectiveness, but clearly something has to be done about that. And then there is the third area, which I mentioned earlier, cooperation.
According to you, will Joe Biden try to fill the military vacuum left by Donald Trump in Middle East to the benefit of Russia and Iran?
I think that what they're doing is reviewing everything, but it's not necessarily through military buildups. But I think, and again, I am not a part of the Biden administration, but from what I read, they are doing major reviews of various parts of the world, all parts of the world, because there has been a lot of disagreement in the way that things have been carried out in the last 4 years. There are some areas that can be built on. And then I have been, as I teach, I talk about this a lot. We're living in a very new era with very different capabilities, both in terms of technology and military. And so I think it's totally appropriate that the Biden administration is really looking very carefully at what is the job of every president is to protect the people, the territory, and the way of life.
Mrs. Secretary, the Obama administration has been charged with being too naive when it signed the nuclear deal with Iran on July 2015. Would you say that for Joe Biden, willing to renegotiate with Iran is a wishful thinking when we know through the IAEA, Iran has not respected the deal since May 2019 and violates it more and more?
I think it is wrong to call the Obama JCPOA naive. I think people don't understand that when you have difficult negotiations like that, you start with something and you develop. The major threat was the development of nuclear weapons. And so I think that it was a big mistake, major mistake of the Trump administration to walk away from a multilateral deal that in fact had the capabilities of limiting the time and provided very good inspection modes. I think that there is discussion about building upon what the JCPOA has been, trying to figure out how not only to limit the Iranian capabilities in terms of nuclear weapons, but also to expand to deal with some of the other issues that are out there that we don't like about Iranian behavior in terms of supporting terrorist groups and operating in other areas. And so it is something that is difficult to get any, I mean, a lot of negotiations depend on some level of trust, and by departing the way the Trump administration did has made it difficult with our friends and allies.
But don't you think that one way or the other, Iran will get the nuclear bomb as North Korean leader Kim Jong-un did, making of it the life insurance of his regime?
Well, I think that this is why it was such a huge mistake for Trump to walk away, because what that agreement did was really get them to stop enriching their uranium, not expanding in terms of the things that they were doing, having them under some kind of visible way of checking on what they were doing. Trump really made a huge mistake. And I do think that it would be obviously very bad if they got a nuclear bomb. And that's why what needs to happen is to do whatever we can not to at least extend the window with the idea, frankly, there is some movement in Iran in terms of a lot of the Iranian people are not happy with the government that they have. So having that window and extending it is a very important part.
Do you fear that a conflict involving the US, Israel, NATO may break out with Iran?
I think one has to always be aware of things, but I think that it is very important to make it evident that that would be a mistake on everybody's part. So I think that this is where the tools of diplomacy are important, where we need our friends, so that it isn't just the United States. And I think that it's very important to move forward on the Middle East peace process, and also to try to figure out. I think the part that people don't fully understand how long the history of Arabs versus Persians, i.e., Saudi Arabia versus Iran, and the struggles that have been going on there. This has been going on a long time. We can't just turn away. We can't decide that we're not going to be a part of finding a solution with our friends and allies. It is a very difficult area. And when one lists the problems that are out there, they clearly are China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, in addition to a few others. But those are the ones that are the most difficult at the moment.
You are a great expert of foreign affairs, one of the greatest. The Israeli government says its relationship with the United States under Donald Trump has never been so good. Obviously, the mood is different with President Biden, who wants to negotiate, as we said it, with Iran and advocates the two-state solution between Israelis and Palestinians, which Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't want to hear about. Is not there a risk of potential crisis between Joe Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, I think that relations are definitely more difficult as a result of some of the past policies. I do think that Joe Biden, again, and people around him are very expert in terms of the kind of relationships, and they will try to figure out what to do. But I do think that one needs to understand that some of the problems lie with the way that Prime Minister Netanyahu has seen issues and has pushed. And I think, again, this is a very hard time, frankly, to have an interview about anything, because there are all these issues that are under review. And so what has happened is that I am sure that they are looking what to do in order to improve the relationship, but also to understand the importance of the Palestinians and the two-state solution.